Hello friends and subscribers, welcome back to Daniel's Tech World. My name is Daniel Rosehill, this is my little tech offshoot channel, and today is the 3rd of December 2024, and as I say that I feel like I've just done one of those kind of psych interviews you see on TV where they ask someone very confused looking coming out of a medical procedure who the president is. Maybe I'm checking my own sanity. Welcome back in any event to the channel. This is the second video since I resumed my YouTube video making, and as you guessed, because it's the title probably, this video is about large language models and prompt engineering, which is the facet of working with LLMs I find really fascinating. How can we use human language, natural language, to optimize the inputs we put in to get the most useful outputs from LLMs? I've certainly developed a few of my own strategies for different use cases like stack research, documentation generation that I really do want to share, and I think video format will be more effective than writing documents, so that's coming soon. But what is coming today is a talk about the, I think, very important topic of what to do about LLM outputs. Now, my contention is that so much has gone into prompt management. If you look for a prompt management tool, a evaluation tool, trying out different prompts on different LLMs, versioning your prompts, all the kind of stuff you can do around optimizing your prompts, and they're great tools, but it's very, very challenging to find something for outputs. Like, okay, so you run these prompts, these wonderful prompts through large language models, and you get out potentially very helpful code snippets or scripts, or sometimes you really do get great generations from large language models. Well, what are you going to do about them? Now, first question you might be saying is, well, why would you want to store LLM outputs? And I would say, well, that's kind of the reason, right? The most mundane one is information retrieval. If we get good outputs, we might want to refer to them at a future point. I frequently use LLMs to generate documentation, as I mentioned. One I just ran, I'll show you guys in a second as well. Is 30 FPS the right setting for the webcam I'm recording this thing on? That's something that it gave a good output, it's useful, and it's the kind of thing I sometimes will say, oh, what was that? What did it recommend again? And I can go back to it. So I like storing these, but there's a lot more actually reasons. There are many more reasons why you might wish to store outputs, and we're going to cover those in today's video. Before we get into that, let me also mention a couple of things about storing outputs that we'll cover. The first thing to know about outputs is if you're kind of new to the idea of doing this in the first place, you've probably already figured out LLMs generally, when you're using them through a web UI like Perplexity or ChatGPT, generate stuff that comes out in markdown. It's not actually the case that there's other ways that large language models can deliver their outputs. If you're using, for example, one of the assistants that OpenAI have in their platform, you can choose JSON as the output format, and the LLM will deliver JSON in response to your prompt, which is much more helpful, of course, if you're integrating that flow into a automation chain like using Zapier. But if you're using a web UI like Perplexity, you're going to be getting Markdown. Something I recommend if you haven't heard of Markdown before and it's your first time, let's actually work with a real example in this video, right? So I'm going to actually just kind of use the LLM to self-ideate this topic, and I just want to make a quick pitch. Well, two techs that I really, really like, and I want to give a shout out to totally unsolicited and without any inducement or anything like that. I just kind of sharing these because I think they're good tools. One is Nuclino. It is a markdown editor. I'll put links in the description. I went on quite a search, as I'm wont to do, looking for the best markdown editor for storing outputs. And I ultimately really came to like Nuclino because the markdown handling is excellent. And we will shortly see why that is very useful for large language model work. Scaling nicely, I'm storing a lot of outputs into it, and it's indexing well, and the performance is very good. And I did check out some other tools in the wiki and KM space. They will have to remain nameless, who said great things about their markdown abilities, and it turned out they really, really didn't live up to that when I just tried to put in a few example outputs from an LLM. So Nuclino is a really good tool. I recommend them highly, and they've given me great support, which is partially why I am as a form of gratitude recommending them to others, not only because I like the tool, they've also got good support, and that really does make a huge difference. The second tool is Whisper AI. I have begun using voice dictation lately, much to the chagrin of my friends who now receive long voice messages dictated. But OpenAI Whisper, it's OpenAI's dictation tool. It's excellent. It's light years ahead of Google, in my opinion. And the only limit or the only negative about OpenAI Whisper is that it's trickier to find tools that use it, whether you want a browser extension or you want a desktop client. I found this thing called Whisper AI. This is it making its little appearance here in the input tab, and it is superb. The accuracy is great. Well, it's Whisper basically, and it is a paid product, but it's not too bad. The pricing, I'm on the top usage tier of $16 a month, which for me, in the vast amount of time that I'm saving on typing, is a no-brainer. So highly recommend it. Great tool. So I'm actually going to be doing voice prompting, and by the way, this is just something to an advantage of using these voice-to-text tools is yes, we're going to be seeing as these LLMs get better, we're going to be seeing more of them doing real-time chat, voice to text, all that good stuff baked into them. Having your own ability to type into anything still has a lot of value. If you're using local large language models on LM Studio, for example, perfect. You can now use voice input into them without needing any kind of a specialized tool. So watch me do a voice prompt. I'm going to just hit this. Please give me 5 good reasons why it is important to store the outputs of large language models. I am a fervent believer in doing so. I think that this is a neglected enterprise. Give me 5 common reasons and give me 5 more imaginative reasons why somebody might wish to store the outputs of large language models. For every reason, provide both a header as well as a detailed paragraph explaining the rationale. Also include a expected rebuttal to this rationale, and then give me a rebuttal to the rebuttal. You can see why LLMs are so engrossing, and I've gone down the rabbit hole. See, this is actually something that I do sometimes, is I'll kind of strategize arguments with my friends. I'm just kidding. Sometimes because I work in communications is what I do in my real occupation. And certainly LLMs are very helpful in this. And you can actually, I think this is amazing, right? You can actually in fact, let me just make my perplexity bigger. You can actually sort of like plan out, hey, they're going to say this, I'm going to say this back. So that's today's prompt discovery or prompt engineering sharing is rebuttal and rebuttal to rebuttals. There's probably a better word for that. The funny thing about this output is, of course, it's missing the most common one. Well, yeah, you just might want the information. But there are so many others. One of those, quality assurance and management, that's a good one. And I would say also you can watch these things grow up almost over time. And that's something I recommend if you're storing outputs. You should be able to get the time file creation date from the file metadata, but you could also play it safe and store it manually. And this allows you to actually track the evolution of these tools over time. If that's something of interest to you, training and fine-tuning, if you want to actually fine-tune and train your own LLMs based on your own real usage data, that would be one reason. So one of the more pragmatic advantages, I would say, for this exercise, using your prior outputs for new prompts if you're storing them, right? And again, I just want to emphasize that to my mind, this is vastly secondary to the primarily use case of just having the info. And if people are scared about AI generated info, is it accurate, hallucinations? And yeah, those are absolutely valid. But you can, if you just get them in, because here's why I would recommend doing that. You could have in the future, the accuracy is constantly improving. Humans can review it. So put your outputs into a first pass or AI generated folder and have a human do the second pass and take that then into your company KM or Confluence or whatever you're using. The second one is AI over AI. As AI gets better, use a future AI to correct the somewhat inaccurate AI generations of today, or use that as training data for those future iterations. AI over AI, this is my own term. We're seeing tools, this being integrated into knowledge management platforms, whereby an AI can actually discover or mine through a wiki. Now, most people are thinking about this in terms of human generated content than AI generated content. I'm thinking about it as AI and AI. You can have actually first pass AI generated research that a second large language model will pass over and incrementally improve. So yes, welcome to the matrix, guys. Now this is good because it allows you to firstly build on prior outputs, chained prompting or iterative prompting strategies, but it also allows you to use one output that you think, hey, this is a better model. I'm going to use this on this. I was working yesterday on, I'm trying to find one of these outputs, categories of memories in LLMs. One of my favorite newfound hobbies is asking LLMs about large language models because it's a complex topic and LLMs excel in explaining complex topics and in gathering info and summarizing info. So I've actually been getting some fascinating outputs, I think, from LLMs, just asking them to explain their, not necessarily their own engineering, but LLM in general. Last night I was doing free range prompting with my voice prompting mechanism, and just kind of outlining what I would regard as the fundamental ways of context management we have currently in LLMs: casual context injection, RAG, system prompting. And my prompt, it's actually a great pity that I didn't record my prompt. Like, I actually did a very poor job yesterday at prompt recording. But usually I will do like this. For example, I use a header and I'll say prompt what. This is probably almost exactly what I prompted. Cursor and VS cursor looks almost identical to VS Code. Is it a fork of the project or what? Probably something very casual like that. Then I do output. Now, the reason that I do this, the reason I follow a very regimented manner, is actually because I want to make it scriptable. If you do it like this, whether you use prompt or a H1 or a H2 with fuzzy logic, you're actually able very easily in Python to extract your prompts from a big batch of markdown files, which have your prompts, then your outputs. On my GitHub, I have Python scripts to do that if you want to save yourself the work, or because you're almost certainly a better Python programmer than me, write your own script, and it works really, really nicely. Let's go back to the one that I had about the memory categories, right? So yeah, I was just kind of ideating with LLMs, with OpenAI. What are the different categories? Do you think this is a good summary? Is there overlap? And it came up with a couple of interesting ones that I did not think about. And this is a prompt that I wrote to kind of lay the groundwork for a blog I might write on this topic, and just really because I'm very curious and thinking about this stuff. So yeah, these are two things I didn't have. Now, let's say I wanted to take this section of it and I say, okay, yeah, that's kind of the kernel. In fact, this might be, for my blog, a good table. So I might say, take the following information and do the following. 1, summarize. 2, remove the footnote bracket markers. 3, reformat to a markdown table. Here's something I'm going to do. And you might think, well, what is the point of typing output? Basically, the LLM is smart enough to know that this is where the prompt ends and this is where your output ends. But always remember that you're talking to a robot, even though LLMs do feel sometimes quite lifelike. And you want to, what might seem obvious to you, that this is the end of your prompt and this is the start of the LLM generated data or the other thing, is not necessarily obvious to the LLM. So my one prompt eng tip for today's video: never assume something is obvious to you, to the model. Frequently say, if you're pasting code, saying start of code snippet, start of output, start of this, start of that, end of this, end of that. These little markers will help the LLM to differentiate between the different items you might have in a prompt. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm saying, here's my prompt, output, and here's the stuff for you to rework. And this is just a reformatting task. And it's doing its thing, and it's taken yesterday's output and it's given me a nice table just as I asked. And what I'm going to do is continue the process. I'm going to record this. When do I record prompts versus outputs? Well, if the prompts might be useful, I record them so I can put them in my prompt library. But this one is probably not that wonderful. But I say, okay, maybe that was a good prompt to keep because it was an effective prompt for reformatting. So I'm going to call this note reformatted context table, and I might include my prompt I'm actually going to just do this first. And fair play to Perplexity. They had a bug last week with one of their paste buttons. And not only did they fix that, but they brought a new paste version just for the prompts, which is extremely useful. So that's one thing I have to say. I do like Perplexity in that they are, I think, much better than many of their competitors like ChatGPT in actually baking good, useful features into their UI that can help. Something that I neglected to include in the original video, so I'm adding this in as a later addition, so apologies if the sync is slightly out, is how to store them in Google Drive, because a lot of people, as much as I really do like these markdown native tools, would prefer to just stick with what they're already using in their day-to-day workflow. And of course, Google Drive is immensely popular. So what you want to do, let's go back to Perplexity and use the copy function for the outputs. Now, what you need to do in the reason that I introduced Markdown early in the video, need to enable the Markdown feature. As far as I know, this still isn't a default option in Google Drive if you're using that. So I'm going to go into Tools and go into Preferences, and there's a button here for Enable Markdown. So you want to enable that, and this will give you Markdown support. So if I just paste using the regular paste function, you can see that it's pasted in Markdown out of Perplexity, which has got the formatting, which is not presentable, basically, right? What I do now, the difference is once you've enabled the Markdown functionality, right click and click on Paste from Markdown, and now we're able to paste into Google Drive with the formatting converted. You might be wondering, rebuttal and rebuttal to rebuttal. In Perplexity, can't you store doesn't it give you a library? And my take is just this: why do I recommend saving your outputs and prompts into your own system? Because I recommend keeping your own data somewhere you can manage it. Whatever. This isn't specific to LLMs. This is just something I do. I always like to, if I'm finding data useful, I want to manage it somewhere. So especially as well, second reason, just to build on that a bit, is if you are doing your prompting in different tools, Google AI Studio, Perplexity, ChatGPT, LibreChat, using it over the terminal, it's everywhere. Gathering up into one place is kind of useful too. And yes, you can use automation tools and keyboard hotkeys to type them in. It's a lot quicker. But this means that it's actually scriptable. I can pull out the outputs, I can pull out the prompts, I can do all sorts of things simply by adhering to this pretty primitive but effective format. So that's it, guys. I think I've talked enough about this topic. I do think output management, it is actually something that I'm very passionate about, in the sense that I think more thought needs to be put into it by the industry, by LLM app designers. I have been actually building my own tool for managing output since the summer, and I'm doing that reluctantly because I have other things that I want to be working on, and this is not a business idea or a startup. It's purely an open source project that I'm making because I want it to exist, at least right now. So if you know of something better, or you're building something better, or you'd like to collaborate with me on my project, be in touch, because I think that output management, here's my summary of my own video, it matters. Gather your outputs, gather your prompts. Don't assume this is useless data, even if it's not 100% accurate. You don't need to gather absolutely everything. I don't advocate for that. But I think if you put good time and effort into prompt engineering and getting your prompts very, very effective and formatting the output and getting it all good, it's lunacy. It's lunacy to then just say, I don't know where those are. They're in like ChatGPT, I think, or they're like in the Perplexity library. Take ownership over that data, get it into your own system, whether that's a database, whether that's your Obsidian Vault, whether that's a cloud tool like Nuclino or Google Keep or Notion. Keep that data. AI will get better. Your thinking will change, but don't assume that it is throwaway data. There are absolutely uses for it. You can build a remarkable wiki. You can build a company wiki. You can get documentation for common problems documented, generated through AI. Yeah, review it 100%. But that doesn't mean that it is not valuable. In fact, it's highly valuable. Thank you guys for watching this video. I love talking about this stuff, as I hope is clear. And if you also are interested, engaged in this topic, do give me a shout, whether here on YouTube or on email. I try to get back to people as soon as I can. Thanks for watching this video. If you're also into LLMs and tech, subscribe. Until the next one.